Once I got COVID, I wear my weekends. I had to wear my glasses. I had to touch a few of my eye all the time.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you too.
Hi, how's it going?
What country?
Ready to roll? Yeah, everybody's good? Good. Thank you. As long as they can hear it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'd like a request to return to regular session. We were just in executive session for purposes of Public Officers Law, Article 7, Section 105, and District Policy 1525 to discuss matters leading to the appointment, employment, demotion, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person. So a motion to request back to regular session.
So moved.
So moved and second. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We are now back in regular session. Tom, could you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do have a quorum this evening, 6 of us present. First, opportunity for public comment. I'll read the formal discussion and I'll do just kind of a formal statement as well. The board encourages public expression. At board meetings, speakers may comment on matters related to any agenda item. The board will not permit in public session discussion involving individual district personnel or students. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Personal attacks, obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Total allocated time allowed for public comment is 30 minutes with the option to extend by vote. There is 3 to 5 minutes allotment per speaker. We offer a comment period at the beginning of regular meetings and a second period at the end, but generally we do not receive comments at special meetings. We do ask speakers to identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. That's a formal statement. Informal statement. We received some feedback from the video before. They couldn't see you, they couldn't hear you, they had no idea who you were or where you were from. So as tonight, if you wish to speak, please come to the podium. We'll do it in order. We'll choose who goes. Please come to the podium, who you are, where you live, street, city, state, and then you go 3 to 5 minutes. Please keep it cordial. It's public comment. It's not discussion. It's not back and forth. It's not arguing with each other. Please be professional. I mean, we're all here for the same reason. There's not one person in here that doesn't want something in the best interest of kids. So please remember, we're all neighbors, community members, friends, our kids play together, etc. So please, please be professional, have an open comment, and then we'll proceed with the meeting. But first off, thanks everybody for coming. Obviously, everyone, hopefully is here for the right reason. So with that, we'll start. We do have a video. Mr. Scott DeWolf sent in a video. I think most people in here probably understand his situation, so he did a pre-recorded video that he wanted to share as part of his public comment, so we'll do that first.
Hi, my name is Scott DeWolf. I live at 4628 Westlake Road in Skaneateles. I have 2 children in the district, Jenna, that's going into 10th grade, and Jake is going into 7th grade. My wife Beth is an educator at FM. And I just wanted to tell people my story. For those of you that don't know me or my story, I contracted COVID in November of 2020. In which I was hospitalized for roughly 7 months. In that time, I received a double lung transplant. I was flown to University of Florida, Gainesville from Upstate Medical in December. And then I flew there, waited for a transplant for 2 months, and I was fortunate enough to receive a double lung transplant there, in which I rehabbed and then finally came back home in June of this year. I had no underlying issues. I was a healthy 51-year-old man at the time, and gradually went downhill very quickly after I developed COVID, and made it through thanks to strong will and the community's help and everybody's prayers and support. I want to thank the community of Skaneateles and everybody else, but mainly right now the community of Skaneateles and all my friends and family there for your support, because without you, I wouldn't be here talking right now. I'm very grateful, and my family's very grateful, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. But I do have one request that I want to talk to, and I feel that I owe the community as well as the board. My request would be that everybody is as safe as possible this upcoming school year, and everybody wears masks. I know it's a big pain, and believe me, I don't want to wear the mask, but I have to. And I probably will have to the remainder of my life in some situations. So with that said, I know a lot of people are against the mask and nobody wants to do it, but we need to think of others, such as our children that are too young to get vaccinated, or people such as myself that are immune compromised, and people that have underlying issues. And we don't want to get anybody sick, and the quicker that we get over this and wear a mask, and I don't want to tell everybody what to do as far as the vaccination, but I would love it if everybody got vaccinated too, because my belief and most people's belief is without that, it's just going to be a reoccurring thing, and which is we're going to have no form of normalcy forever if we don't nip it in the butt and get over this, which would be great for everyone. I wanted to say lastly that if if one person becomes moved by this, or I can help one person, that's great, because everybody helped me. So if I can help one person get either vaccinated or wear a mask or decide to send their kids to school with a mask, instead of the alternatives of moving or sending somebody to homeschool or whatever anybody's choice is, that would help, because I owe it to you and you owe it to yourself as well as a community member to be the best community member you can be. So please think about what I said, think about my story. I hope nobody ever has to experience it, and think of the healthcare workers. We have constant contact with these healthcare workers that saved my life in Florida as well as in Syracuse, and they're fighting a war, and it's tough on them, and it's tough on everybody else, and I've seen the dark side of COVID, and trust me, it's not good. So please think about each other, and let's be strong and be Lakers together. Thank you.
So thanks, Mr. Gold, for sending that in, and everybody's patience getting through that. So who's next? Sir?
My name is Kevin DiOrio. I live on Franklin Street Road. I'd like to begin tonight by revisiting some comments that were made 2 weeks ago in this room. They were skewing of truth at best, and I would like to remind the board that all I was looking for was some clarification. The first thing I'd like to address is when the question of what would happen if the school didn't follow a mask mandate was asked, it was met with the reply of, I believe they would shut us down. Believing something will happen and actually having something happen are two totally different things. In a normal world, a simple, I don't know, I'll get back to you later on that would have been good enough. In our current state, I believe that answer should have been known before the question was asked. Not actually knowing the answer and still throwing one out there could be seen as skewing the truth. The second thing is, when it was said, and I quote, "For those of you that are insisting that mask mandates already exist, they do not in New York State at this moment." As I discussed last time, my son recently attended a summer camp provided by the school. In the email from his camp teacher, procedural item number 5 stated, "Campers are required to wear a mask while inside of the school unless they are eating or drinking, so please have your child come to camp with a mask." Now, I could go into detail about my rebuttal to that email, but it isn't needed. We were told 2 weeks ago that there were no mask mandates in place at that time. That's not even a skewing of truth. That's a lie. The email clearly stated the school was mandating masks. The board and the superintendent need to be trusted. When lies are being told in a public meeting, the trust is lost. Last time I said that we can do better. This time I'm saying that you can do better. The next topic I have are the masks that everybody is wearing. 2 weeks ago, the pre-executive meeting that's posted online showed that nobody in this room was wearing them. The clock struck 7, the doors were unlocked, and just like that, everybody had one on. Is COVID like a gremlin? Gets real mean after 7 p.m., more contagious? Or is it 7 a.m. so our children can be forcibly masked? Nobody's asking to eliminate the mask. We're asking for parental choice. A year and a half ago, many things that are going on today were considered conspiracy theories. Unfortunately, it seems that the only difference between a conspiracy theory and reality is a little bit of time. I know that this board couldn't care less of what we think, and it's evident that they don't care about facts or warning labels for that matter. As I said last time, the district needs our kids more than we need it. So before I waste any more time, I'm here to notify you verbally and in writing that we're pulling my son out of the district. With the skewed truth and lies that I heard in only one meeting, my trust in the administration is lost. Mask mandates were first. We all know what's coming next. I'll continue to speak out for parental choice regardless, but in anticipation of what will develop in this school year, we'll homeschool until parental choice is an option again. And I hope more parents follow. Our children, our choice.
Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Katie Cox. I live on Vanderbilt Road in Skaneateles. I'm coming in kindergartner and moving up to second grade. First off, I don't think anybody should get appointed to the open role on the Board of Education who's currently or previously has been involved in litigation or is disputing the last DOE election. Also, I believe masks should be mandated in schools. Parental choice does not work to protect my child. Masks work best when everyone is wearing them. It's not hard to understand why masks work. If I'm going to sneeze, I think everybody wants me to cover my mouth. I don't have to cover my mouth if I'm wearing a mask because my mask is covering my mouth. We teach our children that, and we should all understand that as adults. Both of my children wore masks all last year during school. They wore them at the playground when cases were high. They wore them in the grocery store. They wear them all over the place, and they're not psychologically traumatized from wearing a mask. They like wearing a mask. I had to often tell them they could take the mask off when they would come home. Their teachers made the masks fun. They had a frog that they would put a mask on every day that had superhero symbols on it. So the kids enjoyed it. It wasn't a challenge. There were a lot of challenges last year, but the mask was not the challenge. We also are happy and willing to submit ourselves and our children to testing required within our community. We think that testing is important. It's the only way that we can all know if someone is sick and then they don't go out if they're asymptomatic. You can't know you're asymptomatic and sick if you don't get a test. When we did community testing here, we participated twice, and we really appreciated how easy it was. But they did a mouth swab for the little kids, and how quick we got the results. There are other people in our community who are way better at talking about science and immunizations and masks, so I think they can speak. But I wanted to talk about the culturally responsible, sustained education that people are really upset about coming down from New York State. So I'm a graduate of Skating Atlas. I graduated in 2002, and we had a new student in our school in like 1998, and he was a person of color. And I was walking down the hall with my friend, and he said, "Hey buddy, what's up? What country are you from?" And the kid was from like Chicago. He was just an American kid. He just happened to be of Southeast Asian descent. It was pretty embarrassing for my friend, but we don't have a lot of diversity in Skating Atlas. And so when we met somebody in the hallway, he just thought, "Oh, guy must be from Rotary." It wasn't, and it was embarrassing. They became best friends. Not a bad story, but the point is there's not a lot of diversity here. So kids need to learn about diversity. It needs to be part of their curriculum. I received an excellent education at Skating Atlas, but the first time I heard about the Tulsa Race Massacre and Juneteenth was from watching The Watchmen on HBO. I learned about the Rosewood Massacre from a TikTok video last year. I didn't learn about these in school, I didn't learn about them in college. I learned about colorism by reading Soul Light, a picture book, to my children. Together, my children and I learned about a lot of the brilliant black women who helped with the moon landing. We read about MLK, we also read about John Lewis. We all know about Rosa Parks, but now we know about Ruby Bridges because we have books that are teaching these to me and to my children. We're lucky that there are books like this now that people are publishing, and it's important that we share these stories because these people were real Americans, and their lives were real, and they were impactful, just as much as any of the white stories that we've all learned in school. While my children are white, I recognize just how important it is for children of color to read these stories to see themselves represented in positive ways in books and media. And I also recognize how important it is that my kids read these stories because they live in a community that's like 96% white. I was in deficit when I left Skating Atlas High. Our community was not diverse, our school was not diverse. But we learned about history, we learned from the perspective of winners, primarily white people and primarily men who were getting books published. I was never told to disrespect or exclude the culture of others, but I was never taught about power and privilege, exclusion and disadvantage. I was taught about Jim Crow and led to believe the work was done. History class stopped around the civil rights era, as if everything after that was fine because it was like the 80s. Woo! I never knew of the AIDS pandemic. I read a book club book about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I never knew all of these details. This is one of the most significant and devastating time periods for gay men, and it should be taught in schools. I have excellent teachers, and I felt that they all taught without bias, but I do not feel that I was taught to think critically about our history as a country. Being critical of our past does not mean disowning it. If we do not criticize our past mistakes, if we do not feel shame for our errors, how can we move forward better? When my children make mistakes, I don't pretend they didn't happen, and then think that they're going to somehow remember that they can't do that again. We parent our children, and we remind them of mistakes that we make, and we move forward together by growing. And that's the same thing we need to do as a country. We can't do that if we don't teach these things in class. That's what cultural responsive sustaining education is about. A quote from the website: affirming cultural identities, elevating historically marginalized voices, practicing mutual respect for qualities and experiences that are different from one's own. Isn't scary, isn't radical, isn't demeaning to white people. Raising the voices of marginalized does not mean that being white is shameful. And you can't be colorblind because our colors and our races define the experiences we have and the way that we are treated and the opportunities we are afforded. It's important that we teach our children these stories and learn from them because it will make us all stronger, more empathetic, and more compassionate. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Please.
My name is Christy Krieger, and I live on Prentice Drive here in Minneapolis. First of all, let me ask all of you parents here a question. If God forbid your child is diagnosed with a disease or any illness, would you seek out your school board or superintendent for medical advice? Would you ask your county executive for medical input for your child? Would you ask the New York State Ed Department how you should treat your child? I think most of you would answer no. If your child is home with the flu, which by the way is contagious and can be deadly, would you go ask your school board for medical advice? Would you call the county executive and ask what he would do for your child? Again, I think most of you would answer no. Then why are we letting our school board make universal medical decisions for our children? Wearing a mask and getting COVID tested and getting the COVID vaccine are medical interventions that are not FDA approved. They are emergency use authorization only. Just as treating a child for an illness is not a one-size-fits-all prescription, neither should masking be a one-size-fits-all intervention. Some parents may not worry at all about the physical and psychological effects of mask wearing on their child, and that's obvious, but some parents do worry about those effects. So there's a simple solution to all of this. Let any medical intervention or procedure for anyone be a choice. Let mask wearing be a choice. For the parents that want their child in a mask, they can wear a mask to school. For the parent that doesn't want their child in a mask, they don't have to wear a mask. If masks work, then the children wearing masks will be protected. If teachers and students' vaccines work, then they too will be protected. Just because children don't wear masks does not make them vectors for disease. Whatever happened to my body, my choice. Just because someone is fearful of a contagion, and we live with contagions all day, every day of our lives, doesn't mean that they get to tell others what to do with their bodies when it comes to medical procedures and interventions. Choices relating to health are a civil right grounded in bodily autonomy as recognized by the Supreme Court, Nuremberg Code, informed consent, and the United Nations Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. We have provided you all with studies and data regarding masks, COVID testing, and the COVID vaccine, and you are ignoring that information. We also clearly see some of the board member stances that everyone should be masked and everyone should be vaccinated based on their social media posts and comments, which really is not a good look for the Board of Education, I might add. All last school year, our kids were in masks. Did our school district collect any data on the effects of masking students' social, emotional, and psychological well-being and academic performance from last year? If you are going to require that all students wear a mask to school rather than giving parents and students the choice, then you must answer these questions for us. Are masks physically safe for children to wear for prolonged periods of time? Is there any data that shows that there are ill effects from wearing masks for long periods of time? Are there any detrimental effects to children's learning or development from wearing masks during instruction? Are there any harmful emotional and psychological issues that arise from wearing a mask for long periods of time? Are there any harmful effects for kids that exercise while wearing a mask? Do masks prevent viral transmission in a real-world setting, not a laboratory setting? And of course, we would like you to cite your sources. If you require masks this year, the onus will be on all of you to provide the research and data in writing to all parents so that we can evaluate and respond to it. If you are unable to defend your position regarding mask wearing for all students with studies and real data, then you cannot justify asking our kids to obstruct their breathing all day long. You cannot require masking just on your belief that masks stop transmission of COVID. Once again, I urge you to support choice. Our children, our choice.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephen Thomas. I'm here with my wife, Erica Thomas. We live at 50 State. Charlie's going to be in 9th grade and Amy is going to be in 1st grade. First of all, I thank the board for giving everybody an opportunity to kind of share their views. I want to preface my comments by explaining kind of the perspective that I'm going to be coming from tonight, and that it's grounded in the education, the training, and experience that I had as an infectious disease physician and scientist. For the 20 years that I was in the Army, I cared for ill service members at Walter Reed, and I worked all over the world studying viruses and developing vaccines and drugs to prevent and treat the infections that these viruses cause. During my last 2 years in the military, I represented the Department of Defense in the United States whole of government response to Ebola, Zika, and MERS, the other severe coronavirus. During my 5 years at Upstate, I have continued to treat patients at the VA, at Krause, and at Upstate. And I spent every day since January 2020 working on ending this pandemic with a specific focus on Central New York. So my perspective is that I trust science and I trust facts. My opinion is that we should all be focusing on two major goals. The first is we should ensure that we maximally mitigate the risk of COVID infection in our children, our school staff, and our community. The second is that we need to provide our children and their families the best chance they have at in-person learning and in-person extracurricular activities for the entire academic year. We should not divert or dilute our focus from these goals. So what's going to prevent us from reaching these goals? The first will be low vaccination rates. Half of the country is not fully vaccinated. Only 30 to 40% of 12 to 18-year-olds are vaccinated, and children less than 12 cannot be vaccinated. Number two, the Delta variant. The initial COVID variant, one person who's infected on average will infect one other person. With the Delta variant, on average, one infected person will infect 8 other people. And number three, the failure to recognize the current risk of COVID to our children. 15% of all infections in the United States last week were in children. That's over 100,000 kids. Right now, over 1,800 kids are hospitalized. The pediatric intensive care units in the South are full. There are no more beds available. COVID in children can kill them. Almost 400 kids have died in the United States since the COVID outbreak. And that doesn't even count the percent, probably 15 to 20% of kids that experience long-haul COVID. On the other side, what's going to allow us to reach our goals? The first is to believe in science. Before COVID, we used to trust our pediatricians to care for our kids. We used to trust their advice. We used to trust our doctors to care for us. But something has changed. But I can tell you, it is not the medical community's care or caring about the communities they serve, the kids or their patients. Number two, everyone who can be vaccinated and who is eligible for vaccination should be vaccinated, not just to protect themselves, but to protect and to contribute to protection of their community and those around them. These vaccines are safe, they are effective, and they protect against the most severe forms of COVID that the Delta variant causes. Third is universal masking. Masks are safe and they work, period. They worked in the hospitals before we even had vaccines available. Where people like Dr. Polino, myself, and the nurses and others work very closely every day with COVID patients protected only by masks. And they work. And they will continue to do so if we wear them. So, if we are serious about reaching these two goals, mitigating the risk to our kids and keeping them in school, I hope that you'll consider making universal masking part of the policy and skin that.
Hello, my name is Jeff Bolberger, 1394 Coach Road, St. Alice, and I have 3 children in the school district. Local school districts now have the responsibility for determining how schools will reopen. In my opinion, based on where we are right now, I'd like to see things go back to normal. The opportunity of containing the virus has long since passed. Hospitals have plenty of capacity, and everyone who's wanted to get vaccinated has had more than enough time to do so. Children are also the least susceptible group in terms of deaths. Let's get back to the joy and innocence of childhood. Let the kids see their friends again and see them smile again at each other. Work on projects together, learn together. participate in the Wax Museum and the one-room schoolhouse. Let the parents see their kids happy again and talking about how much they enjoyed school and how fun it was and how much they learned. Allowing our children to go back to a normal school routine will provide so many wonderful benefits for them. If a student chooses to wear a mask, that's not a problem, that's their right. We should all still keep the remote option available to students that can't make it here physically because of their conditions. It has been almost 2 years now. For a 10-year-old, that's 20% of their life. What's going on right now isn't working that well. If now is not the right time to go back to normal, when will it ever be? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary DeRugo. I live at 4366 County Line Road. And I have 2 kids in the district. One will be entering 9th grade and one will be entering 11th grade. The first thing I want to do is say thank you. And it's thank you to everybody here. You did not know when you signed up, when you went to the school board, that this was going to be a major part of what you did. There's a lot of frustration for everybody in this room, and I understand that. I am an emergency doctor who's been fighting this pandemic since day one. And just like you're frustrated about masks or no masks in schools, I see it every day with visitor policies. Who can I let in, who can I can't? I would love to have everybody at the bedside, but then I look at my nurses and other people and how did it go? And we're making these rules up as they go along because there were no rules, and so there's frustration for everybody. And so I understand that, and I hopefully we can come together as a community to work. As far as the medical information for it, I'm going to confer to Dr. Thomas. That's what I do every day at work. I work over at the VA, and when we have issues and we're looking for guidance, we look at the CDC, we look at the other people in the VA, and I defer to experts like Dr. Thomas, and I urge you as the board to do so as well. And the last thing I ask you to do is feel lucky. And feel lucky that this conversation that we're having is being had all over the United States. We're not starting this conversation with, we've lost a colleague, we've lost a teacher. We're not starting with it next week. There'll be counselors available for the students who have passed away. We're not starting it with, we don't have teachers to teach our students because all we have are substitute teachers. So I really encourage people to work together because we're trying to come up with the best solutions that we can. I encourage people to follow science, to follow professionals like Dr. Thomas, like I do every day, but to continue to work together so that we can start the school year together. Because quite honestly, nobody knows what this is going to look like in 2 weeks. We didn't know where we were going to be 2 weeks or 2 months past, and we don't know. So we've got to continue to work together, have good conversations, or else we're not going to get anywhere, and we're not going to set good examples for the students who participate in this.
My name is Chris Paulino. I have 2 children, one entering kindergarten, one entering 4th grade. We live on 2 Ramblewood Drive, right up the road from here. So similar to Dr. Thomas, I'm also an infectious disease physician. I have about 10 years of experience in clinical research, vaccine development, basically followed the same path that Dr. Thomas did. I'm going to speak a little bit more from my recent experience. I've actually been on service in the hospital the past probably 3 of the past 4 or 5 weeks. More recently, what I've seen is the COVID patients coming in are primarily unvaccinated, and they're generally younger than I experienced earlier in the pandemic. This is a different virus from what I've seen over the past month. 2 of the 3 patients I saw in the past 4 days that had COVID were under the age of 40. This is a different virus. We don't know what this is going to look like as we get into the school year. We don't know what it's going to do to the children. We know that based on the data from the South, as Stephen pointed out, ICUs in the pediatric wards are full. We don't want to see that happen here. Now, I know somebody had mentioned that we have capacity in our hospitals. To a point, we do. But at Upstate, for example, we're on divert almost every day, meaning we have to send patients away. And that's not necessarily because of COVID, although our COVID numbers have gone from about 2 cases to 30 in the past 3 weeks. So we are having a significant rise. But we're also seeing the effect of elective surgeries, people wanting to come in for chemotherapy, people needing to have tumors resected. Those kind of things are being affected by this virus. That's what we saw last year. That's what happened during the previous viral outbreak. Now we're dealing with this new Delta variant. I struggle with the idea of not having masks in the school because I don't know what this is going to do to our children. We don't know those answers. We have data from before, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and if we're not careful, we're going to have one of those experiences where we're going to have vigils and moments of silence that we don't want to have, and I don't want to get to that point. So I think at the end of the day, we're talking about a mask, and our kids all went through it last year. I feel like they went through it with flying colors for the most part. I don't know of anybody who's actually been harmed by a mask, but I know of a ton of people who have been harmed or killed from this virus, and now the virus is different. So I think moving forward, I think everybody wants our kids to be safe. I think that should be the priority of this discussion, and I think that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you.
My name is Lori Alexander. I live up on Butters Farm. The information I'm going to read to you is from the CDC and Johns Hopkins. So as you are aware, both the New York State Education Department and the governor, and now the county executive, have not mandated masks, but have instead made strong recommendations that students and staff mask. There is a world of difference between mandate and strong recommendation. My hope is that Skaneateles will embrace the flexibility offered in this strong recommendation and not mandate masks or distancing for students in any setting. I believe the data is firmly on the side of this position. The policy response to COVID, particularly as applied to children, has been inept. We have nearly a year and a half's worth of data. Not to use that data to craft better policies and create better outcomes for our children would simply be irresponsible. The data tells us key things that argue strongly against masking children. Children are at extremely low risk from death. In fact, I looked on the county website today, and we've had 0 deaths under 19 the whole pandemic. Conversely, they are 3 to 4 times higher. There's a higher mortality risk from the flu for children, and a 10 times higher risk of suicide. Even with the Delta, children are extremely low risk, with some data suggesting that pediatric hospitalization rates for Delta are less than half that they were for earlier variants. Children are not super spreaders. They are not the reservoir of COVID-19 that is prolonging the pandemic. Multiple contact tracing studies have shown that the R0 for children is actually below 1, meaning it is mathematically impossible for them to drive this pandemic. Mask mandates, especially in schools, do not reduce school or community transmission. With these facts in hand, it becomes clear that if you are to continue to mask children for COVID with vaccines universally available to all that are at risk, there will be no logical point when we can unmask them. Even with the widespread vaccination of children for COVID-19, using the arguments currently in vogue, the greater lethality of the flu would counsel permanent masking to limit its spread, never mind the CDC analysis showing that doing so does not limit its transmission. If we do not take this off-ramp for masking, there will be no other. Children are extremely low for COVID. As of now, there are 332 deaths of children with COVID in the United States. This compares to 450 per year in a normal flu season. And remember, the 332 deaths occurred during 2 COVID seasons. Delta has not changed the game. Children are still at extremely low risk for hospitalization or death from COVID. Children are not super spreaders, even unvaccinated. The original rationale for masking kids was that they were super spreaders, that they wouldn't get sick, that they might kill grandma. In fact, they are not. The study from the CDC found that each student infected generated an additional 0.77 infections, whereas a teacher infected generated 2.6 infections, which is 3 times the rate of a child. Mask mandates, especially in schools, do not impact school or community transmission. In the study, the author states we do not see a correlation between mask mandates and COVID-19 rates among students. A longitudinal study consistently shows no impact of mask mandates on either in-school transmission or community transmission. In fact, the rate of transmission is routinely higher in both schools and the community areas where masks are mandated. Other research has shown that more broadly, there is no impact from masking on case transmission rates. With all of this, the only possible remaining rationale for masking is to protect adults who choose not to be vaccinated. Given that vaccines are available to all adults who want them, and that children never saw any increased mortality, including extremely fragile children, this rationale seems specious. Finally, as you make your decision, I hope that you will bear in mind the seasonal nature of this disease. Otherwise, I believe you will be pressured to remask come late fall. Thank you for letting me take the time to read this. I realize that this is a very fraught time, and I appreciate how challenging your position is. I hope that hearing as many perspectives as possible will help you in your decision-making process.
Thank you. We're at 30 minutes. First of all, I want to just thank everybody in the room for having a professional conversation, share your viewpoints in a professional way. We appreciate that very much. We're all in this together. Just a quick show of hands, just so I have a general idea of how many more people would like to comment. Okay, thank you very much. Fellow board members, are we okay extending?
That's not bad.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, sir.
I'd like to thank the board, school board members for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Brian McLaughlin. I'm at 53 Calumet Drive. I'm a surgeon from Upstate University. I work primarily over at Auburn Community Hospital. My wife Whitney and I would like to extend our gratitude to the members of the Skinny-Ellis school system for the work they have done over the past year and a half during this pandemic. We have 3 children currently in the elementary school system, and we welcomed the 4th this past year. Due to the efforts of the school system over the past year, we were able to keep all our children safe, and we had them educated remotely at home while we navigated a high-risk pregnancy. We were amazed at how well the teachers were able to engage our children remotely, even kindergartners, for a successful academic year. We're very excited to have them return this year to in-person, in-classroom education. However, we're still fully aware of the risks that are still present. As COVID cases rise in the local region, especially with the threat of the Delta variant, those who are not at risk, those who are not vaccinated currently still remain at highest risk. Our children are not yet eligible for vaccination. We must remain vigilant during this time to ensure that they're safe. We fully support the board's efforts to maintain a safe classroom environment by following CDC guidelines, including social distancing and indoor masking. Personally, as a surgeon, I know my field very well. When it comes to efforts and questions of infectious disease, I turn to these guys. I know my limitations. I trust these guys with the care of my patients and also with my family. I follow their recommendations. Thank you all for your efforts in guiding our schools in this community during these very difficult times. Thank you.
My name is Megan Katie. We live at 16 Griffin Street. I have 3 children who have been through the district. My daughter graduated last year. I have a daughter who's an incoming sophomore this year. I want to thank the board for opening these questions to everyone, opening comments, and having everybody have the ability to speak their mind. I thank the board for everything that they've done and our school district for trying their best with what information is out there as it develops, as it's ongoing. We don't know everything about the Delta. We don't know everything about COVID, but what we're trying to do is listen to experts and follow what we can to mitigate as much as we can, just as what we would do with a disaster plan. You practice, and you practice to hope that our children remain safe. That's what we do as parents. And I work at the cancer center with immune-compromised individuals every day, people who are receiving cancer treatment, people who are, some of them are receiving blood transfusions. And what I want to say is that, we have to think beyond just our immediate family or our kids or the inconvenience possibly of wearing a mask. I wear one every day at work. All my colleagues wear them every day at work. And no one's come up with any difficulty in having to do that. Yes, it might be an inconvenience. Yes, you might have to enunciate a little bit more. You might have to speak a little bit louder to someone who might not be able to hear you. But at the end of the day, I am so thankful that we have the protection we have to prevent the transmission and to protect our patients. And it's time to start thinking about the whole community and not just ourselves. Thank you.
Hi, I'm changing topics for just a second. I want to thank you all for letting everybody speak, and then for all the people who have the courage to come up with such passion and different opinions. I'm just very grateful that we're able to do that. I want to just voice my support.
Name and address, please, first, sorry.
I'm sorry, 2101 Ivor. I would like, my name is Karen. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I would like to voice my support for you to appoint Rob Bennett to the seat that Gary first vacated. Many of you know Rob very well, and you know that he puts kids first always, and that he's very thoughtful and caring person. I feel that you have an opportunity as a board to make a significant gesture to appoint Rob to this position, signaling to the 600 plus voters who supported him that they also now will have voice in their community. Appointing Rob is just a perfect opportunity for you to show that diverse opinions, as we can see here, are okay. And that even with some differences, we're still a very strong community. The divisions that we saw last year, I think it needs to stop. I'm going to try to do everything I can to help create more effective dialogue and diffuse some of the frustration and anger. And I believe that by appointing Rob to the Board of Education, you also have an opportunity to help with that fight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen Tellerico, County Line Road. Children are not super spreaders of COVID. Children have statistically a 0 chance of dying from COVID. The negative side effects of masks reported by the WHO include nausea, dizziness, headaches, skin problems, eye issues, and decreased blood oxygen levels to the brain. Masks prevent facial mirroring and makes emotional connections more difficult. Since children have the lowest death rate with COVID infections, the cost benefit of requiring children to wear an investigational face covering with emerging safety issues is not justifiable. Let each parent decide what is best for their child. Our children, our choice.
Kathleen O'Brien, 53 Onondaga Street. I just want to say thank you to the board members for everything you've done over the last year and a half. My children, I have an entering first grade and third grader, and you've done everything possible to make sure my children were in school, and you gave me the choice to send them or not based on how I felt. And I can say, much like some of the other parents have said, my kids were completely fine coming home. Often, if not every day, I had to tell them to remove their mask because they forgot it was there. In the wintertime, they said it helped because they were cold. So really, the biggest thing I know, and I'm not a doctor, I don't pretend to be a doctor, not having my kids in school would be the biggest detriment. And you allowed my children to be in school 5 days a week with very little breakup, and I largely thank masks for that. So thank you for all you've done, the difficult position you've all been put in and are continued to put in doing and making the best decisions for our children. So thank you all for what you've done.
Thank you.
Paulino. I'm at 2 Ramblewood Drive. We have our 2 children in the district, 9-year-old and 5-year-old going into kindergarten. I'm in a unique position, I believe, somewhat, that I'm very fortunate to work here in the schools as the physical therapist. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I've been able to work with so many children. And what I saw every day since the pandemic began was after those periods of remote learning where our children could not be in school, how happy they were just to be back. They did not care that they were wearing a mask. They did physical therapy with me while wearing a mask, completely comfortably. And they just wanted to be with their friends. They wanted to be spending time with their teachers. They wanted that experience. I didn't see any of that dullness because they had to wear a mask. I just saw my kids coming home at the end of the day and being so excited to have been there, and the children that I worked with every day enjoying the experience. So I am advocating for universal masking based on the science behind it and based on my experience in the school, as well as advocating for the children who are high risk, because I think it needs to be safe for all children, especially considering that about half of the population within our schools are under the age of 12 and do not yet have the opportunity to be vaccinated. My 9-year-old wants to be vaccinated. My 9-year-old wants to wear a mask in the school because he understands why. He wants to protect his teachers. He wants to protect his friends. So I'm very proud of him for his thinking in that area. And I am thankful for all of your efforts to keep our children safe. And I just appreciate all that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Last call. We do have one at the end of the meeting for everybody who likes to stay. Last chance, first one. Thank you again. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the professionalism with everybody in the room, sharing your opinions in a professional way. So thank you very much for that. Moving on. Approval of minutes, August 3rd. Take a motion to approve August 3rd, 2021 board meetings.
So
Moved and seconded by Amanda. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Review. Minutes are approved. We'll move on to the superintendent's report. Eric?
All right, thank you, Mike. Thank you, sincere thanks to everybody that turned out tonight. These are definitely conflicting opinions, but in all of that, I hear 2 things that are the same. There are parents that are here that care about their kids, and there are parents that are here that want their kids in school. When we set out last year to tackle this pandemic and all the changes that we had to make in our school district, it was based on those 2 simple things. Safety first, in-person learning second. With our administrative team, we've done work over the past year and really boiled down our belief system into 3 things. Relationships and connections are absolutely necessary for learning. Anybody who experienced remote learning last year, as good as it was and as hard as our teachers tried, there is no substitute for in-person learning and the relationships formed between children and each other and children and their teachers. There is no substitute. So this is everything that we've tried to defend throughout this whole process. Safety first, in-person learning. The relationships, the connections, you'll hear that theme throughout the year. This is something we're in the process of rolling out district-wide. It is at the core of everything that we believe about education. You'll never convince me that these are not the core of everything. With regard to masks, today, Onondaga County had the distinction of having the single highest rates of COVID-19 transmission in the entire state of New York. That was the data that was released today. When we take our recommendations from industry professionals, we don't just make one call. We dig deep and we look at everything. So the organizations that are in unison recommending universal masking for kids include right now the Onondaga County Department of Health, the Cayuga County Department of Health, the New York State Department of Health, New York State Department of Education, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Family Physicians, and the American Public Health Association. Those are just to name a few, all urging the same thing, universal masking. So, as with last year, if you don't like the rules, wait a week, they're likely to change. Our intention is to start and follow the directions of science and follow the direction of all of the experts in our community, including Upstate Medical University and all the individuals who signed on to that document that was put out last week, and to follow their direction as we start school. I will speak as a parent as well, as an educator. Coming into a new district and a new community is extraordinarily difficult. To work with a staff of people whose face you have never seen, to connect with almost 1,300 kids that have, for the most part, never seen my face, I've never seen their face. It is a difficult, frustrating thing for all of us, especially those involved in education that focus on relationships and connections. It is a difficult thing to do. We hate the masks, but we are willing to do those things if it keeps us safe and if it keeps our kids in in-person learning. One of the things that I would ask for those who cannot be persuaded and who would not consider the efficacy of masks, we're not here to argue those points with you. People have their opinions and they're entitled to those opinions. But what I will talk about is quarantines. When we as a school district need to operate, the quarantine orders are the law of the land. The frustration of working in Skaneateles is that we fall between two different counties, Cayuga County and Onondaga County. Those two county health departments are not even on the same page necessarily with regard to quarantine orders. Things last year like 3 feet of social distancing versus 6 feet of social distancing versus masks, now it's vaccinations, and proximity and time in proximity. All of those are factors. So whether or not you believe masks are the solution, think of the other side of this is that we are doing everything we can to control everything we can to prevent quarantines. If we have a certain critical mass of teachers put into quarantine, school is closed. These are not threats. These are things that happened last year. If you remember all the letters and all the updates that were sent, we reached a critical mass of teachers that were placed in quarantine, whether they're infected or not, whether they're sick or not. If we reach that critical mass, school is closed and we are back in remote instruction. And that would be in 10-day spurts. And depending on which county it falls in, it could be an entire room, it could be kids within certain proximity. So there's certain things that we're advocating for. Number one is to start with masking. Number two is thankfully 6 feet of social distance was dropped to 3. And the 6 feet for those of us who spent countless hours together trying to figure that out and create additional spaces and hire additional people. Thankfully that was dropped to 3. So for the most part, as far as your kids will experience, it's school with masks. 3 feet to us as school is normal. We were always about 3 feet away. It's school with masks. There are a slew of other rules, regulations, nuances. Onondaga County released a chart describing their contact tracing process, and it's going to take you some time to look at it and understand it because it's a lot of if this, then that kind of scenarios. We're working with Cayuga County right now to produce a similar type of document so that when we are working in a classroom and your children, maybe your neighbors, or your kids play with their friends that live in 2 different counties that sit next to each other in class and experience 2 completely separate quarantine orders, we will at least be able to explain that to you in a way that everybody understands and hopefully up front. And each and every time it changes, we will communicate that to the entire community. So again, if you're unwilling to change your opinions on the efficacy of masks, whether you're for them or against them, for us operationally, if our focus is to keep kids in school, masks limit our need to quarantine many of our teachers, many of our students. Vaccination status, all of these other things are factors that would be contributed. Certain things already exist. Masks are to be worn at all times during transportation. That was the case already. That was a federal mandate that came out. So now a 66 passenger bus can hold 66 students once again. And that is another thing that we can provide to the community. So for those of our parents that are used to sitting outside of Waterman Elementary School or parking an hour and a half early to get online, put your kids in the bus. And that will cut down on that traffic drastically. Send your kids to school in the bus this year. And all of those little things will be mitigated as well. So that's pretty much the update on masks for now. There are a million other questions I'm sure people will have. I'll get back to that in just a minute. But I wanted to transition over to an executive order that came out today from Onondaga County. For those of you who are familiar or watch the news, our county executive placed an emergency order and basically mandated vaccination for all school personnel. So the mandates for vaccination require all school personnel to be vaccinated, or if school personnel are not vaccinated, they are to submit to weekly testing. There are a lot of nuances and questions about that, how that's going to look, what kind of tests, where those tests will be administered, what will the cost be. So I just sent this to my staff this afternoon to let everybody know that this was the case. And we have another call on Thursday with Dr. Gupta from Onondaga County Health Department to have the opportunity to ask more questions. So for those of you who work with us, fire away, ask us those questions. And I'll make sure Dr. Gupta hears from us on Thursday so that we can present some clarity to the community. When they say all staff, they mean everybody. And that is from our food service workers to our district office staff who have very limited contact with kids. Everybody means everybody. And that was the message today when we met with Onondaga County. Moving on. Here with me a second. Moving on, NYSED put out, New York State Department of Education put out a document this week that basically advised against high-risk sports. So I know that's a hot topic, and basically advised school districts that are operating football, volleyball, wrestling, things like that in the fall to cancel those high-risk sports. Thankfully, our county executive and the people in Onondaga County did in fact see the value of the things that kept our kids engaged throughout the pandemic. Sports for our kids last year, also their arts, their extracurriculars, music. It really didn't matter what your kids are connected to, it mattered that they were connected. And to remove any of those things for our kids would be a disaster. So thankfully, right now, our county has no intention of canceling those activities, those sports for our kids. They did, however, start to talk about voluntary pool testing, the testing of athletes and things like that. I don't think it's going to look like what it looked like last year, but right now we do not have a clear answer from either county on what is going to be required for testing. The way the pool testing works, it was on a voluntary basis, but I think some of the concern from school personnel has to do with if there is a positive case found in the voluntary pool. Until they identify or contact trace that person, the fear is that everybody in the pool will be subject to quarantine. So we're not sure how effective that process is going to be, and Dr. Gupta heard some of that from us today, and we have a lot more questions to answer on that. So we will continue to try to figure out what that looks like, and as soon as we know what the answers are about hot button topics like testing of athletes, we will share with our community. And again, please know that just like in the classrooms and the quarantine orders, where you reside is everything. Our physical building lies within Onondaga County, so we're subject to their rules. But if your children are quarantined because of school or sports or activities, your home address will determine the result of what your quarantine actually looks like. So for our board members, any questions? That was a lot, but any questions on that before I move on?
I have a list of questions.
Sure.
So it's inevitable that some students, unfortunately, will probably be quarantined
We've had it already.
at some point, right?
Yeah.
So what is the plan going forward for this school year, or tentative plan, so that those quarantine students aren't missing out on what's going on in school?
So right now, the live stream option exists for students placed in quarantine. That is,
Will that be for all grades or primarily on the upper grades?
our plan right now is that is the solution to the
Okay.
quarantine problems, is that students can, we have these skills, we have this technology, we have these abilities, all the Chromebooks, nice shiny new Chromebooks will be distributed shortly. And right now, our solution to the quarantine problem is live streaming the classrooms.
Okay.
The other thing I would say on that is every kid is different, every child has different needs. Communicate with your building principal and let us know what those needs are. So if there are additional supports or unique circumstances or other things that we need to consider, if you let us know, we are more than happy. We will bend over backwards to work with you and your kids. And the shame of it is most of the time that people are put into quarantine, it's through obviously no fault of their own. It's just where you happen to sit in class that day, or who happened to be within 3 feet of you, or who you ate with, who you rode in a car with, things like that. The health departments decide, they make that decision. The information that they get from the school district really extends as far as, seating charts and who we could identify as people that possibly should be contacted. We give those lists to the county, and the county themselves, they make the determination who is quarantined or who is not. And it's not a school district decision.
Anybody else before I keep going?
Yeah, so does that also mean that if a student needs remote-only instruction, that teachers will have remote-only students spread out in their classrooms on a regular basis?
Probably not this year. And the reason for that is that if you remember our conversations about borrowing from our entire support structure as a school district, our reading specialists, our math specialists, our speech and language specialists, everybody with a degree became a classroom teacher last year, and that was how we kept K through 7 open full time. So a lot of our kids need those supports back in place. We cannot afford nor have the resources to deploy those same types of remote instruction. And really it's going to be handled as it's always been handled, as a medical exemption. Anytime we've had children that have legitimate medical exemptions to instruction, we figure out workarounds, whether it's tutoring services, whether it's after school, before school. There's a million options, but again, these are difficult things to plan for when we don't know the individual circumstances of the child. So all of those can be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Is it safe to say that most schools, if not close to all, are not offering remote this year?
Yeah, almost. I think nobody in our region is offering universal remote instruction. Everybody's in the same boat. Once the 6 feet of social distance requirement went away, that remote instruction thing was something that we could endure for a year. But I don't see anybody going, full bore back into a remote instruction. That being said, New York State Department of Education basically came out and said remote instruction is not required. So we are not required as a school district to provide it. However, in the case of a quarantine or a shutdown, we absolutely must preserve our ability to throw that switch and turn it. And we're there right now. So when and if we need to do that, we'll communicate that, and kids will already be home with their Chromebooks, and they tune on and get going.
It's a little clarity on the mask side of things. I think, from what we all heard, is day one as of today. I mean, that's the decision. Certainly this isn't something that's being declared for the entire school year. As things change, we'll continue to revisit. But maybe touch on the fact of, some initial thoughts on day to day. So for example, when we went back to school last year, they couldn't go on the playground. Playground was closed. So with a masking policy on day one, do you anticipate things like the playground being open and the kids being able to play without masks on? And same thing, I think we received a comment through email. Appreciate everyone who sends us comments with different ideas. But one of the ideas was floated was the consideration of, hey, if the weather's nice and you can eat lunch outside with the masks off, is that something we're going to take advantage of?
So we already did that, and I can tell Mr. Caraccio will speak in a few minutes here to talk about how many middle school kids poured out of the middle school every day to eat lunch. Weather permitting, we encourage our teachers to teach outside. We encourage our students to eat outside. And then when they're outside, the masks do not need to be worn. Right now, the mandate, or the recommendation, I should say, correction, the recommendations have to do with universal masking while indoors. So playgrounds are open, if kids are outside, masks can be removed. We will work with our teachers and staff to figure out appropriate mask breaks throughout the day. And then the other thing are those little ancillary additions that we can do in cases where we may have a larger instructional space or a smaller class setting. Some of our advanced classes may only have 8 to 12 students in them. In those cases, those kids can be spread out 6 feet plus, which further allows that teacher to avoid any quarantines or student isolation or teacher isolation that would happen from an infection. So it's still 6 feet wherever possible, but I think we know from last year it's just not possible to do that everywhere. We needed normal class sizes again, and largely, again, it's school with masks while indoors, and while kids are outside, masks can be removed. And again, I don't know what the mandates are going to be. For those of you who have a television, you'll know that there was a turnover in power at the state level from Governor Cuomo's resignation. And there's a lot of rumors coming out of Albany right now that Kathy Hochul actually made a comment in an interview that her intention upon her first day as the first female governor of New York State is to institute a universal mask mandate. So some of the nuances, some of the things like masks indoors and masks can be removed outside or mask breaks, those may be spelled out for us very specifically, and then we'll adjust as needed. But I think like we did last year, the district will take a really judicious look at the data as it comes in, the information that comes in. We will consult with experts and take as least a restrictive position on these things as we safely can without ever jeopardizing student safety or our ability to provide in-person instruction.
Thank you. Shameless plug for the back to school forum.
Oh, that's on it. That's further down my list.
Oh, further down.
Yes.
So just to kind of reiterate 2 points you made, to make sure I understood them and that anybody else that listens to this later understood them. You are going to send out some formal communication on the mask policy as we get closer to school.
Absolutely.
And
we have a couple
as
weeks left,
right.
And I'm sure things are going to change multiple times between now and then, but we will absolutely send out frequent communication to the parents.
And as a district, we will have the flexibility going forward, should suddenly things improve over the course of the next month or so. Wouldn't that be amazing? And we're sitting here again, and we can say, wow, the experts, the medical experts that do this for a living, that provide you this information, are saying, hey, it's looking good, and we can slowly make some pullbacks, that we will have the ability here as a board, as a school, as a district to say, we're going to dip our toes in this water and with careful consideration, tweak this over the course of the year. This is not what we decide today on the first day of school, is not what our kids necessarily are going to be doing in June.
Yeah.
Based on data.
Yeah, and if you remember, it's exactly how it unfolded last year. As rates of infection subsided, the restrictions subsided accordingly. And that happened throughout the year, ultimately until it were done.
And at this point, as a group of superintendents or as a league, however how that works with the sports, we're going to proceed with sports under whatever guidance that we have to follow, but our position, the league's position, is that they're going to try to maintain a sports season for the students.
So right now the important thing is we're playing sports.
Okay.
What they're going to do with mask mandates and things like that, it's really wide open right now. I don't know if they're going to say that they're not required when outdoors. So that would free up some sports, but obligate others. So all of that is to unfold ideally as soon as possible, considering sports start Monday. So as far as Monday goes, if you're outdoors, and the things are, if you're outdoors, masks are not currently required. If Section 3 comes up with some sort of consistent rule or regulation, those are things that we will follow up and communicate to the community as it happens.
Eric, do we know at this point where we stand on vocal music, instrumental music, woodwinds, for example, and what that picture looks like for students in this coming year?
Yep, Dr. Blair in his final days at Skinny Atlas, we had that conversation yesterday. We have unique masks that we purchased that instruments can be played through. We have social distancing wherever possible, and our attitude right now, like we said earlier, is it's school with masks until we hear different. But our ensembles, our music, the show must go on, and that's the plan right now. Even with drama and plays, you know, right now it'll be productions with masks.
Okay.
And this may change many times, but when can you anticipate we will receive clarification on parents, back to school night, parent volunteers, teacher conferences, and the district's stance on that?
There are a number of things that will be communicated shortly by way of individual building principals that will have all of that information shared soon. We're trying to get better.
Uniform among the 4 buildings?
We're trying to get better at doing things at the same time. So if you have, you know, children in multiple buildings, you're not hearing from Waterman one day and the high school 3 days later, or vice versa. So the consistency has been something that we've done a lot of work over the summer on, and try to release that at the same time. An example would be you know, elementary school schedules. And then really our use of Parent Square. We see that as something that's going to be a huge benefit for the folks out there that haven't become too familiar with it yet. The nice thing about it is that it's highly customizable. I have 4 kids in 3 different schools. The amount of information, the volume of information that comes at me is so overwhelming that I'll be honest with you, I'm not always up on it. Not to mention trying to manage the information in this school district. So the power is in your hands of how you want to receive it: emails, phone calls, text messages. We have families that request the information in foreign languages. We have that capability now. And really, the idea is it's a one-stop shop. Our goal is to be the first and best source of information for all things. And thank you for saying that, because consistency and consistent timing are critical.
Consistency in policy as well, so that we don't have parents of kids in Waterman and in State Street who have to go by different rules if you walk 200 feet down the hill.
Yep, and just remember, some things are age appropriate with some of the differences that happen within buildings, but other things, yeah, you're right. And we hear your point, and we've done a lot of work over the summer on those very things. Thank you.
Last question, but it's not really a question. We can hear from the principals tonight, because I have a few specific school questions.
We are,
but I can save for them.
they're here and they're ready.
Okay, I'll save them.
Okay. All right, moving on. Culturally responsive, sustaining education. We heard some concerns at our last board meeting, and I promised to follow up following my meeting with the Chancellor of the Board of Regents, Dr. Lester Young, last week. If anybody's had the opportunity to hear Dr. Young speak, he's not only very eloquent, but he has walked the talk. He has been a teacher, he's been an administrator, he's been a principal, a superintendent, and now he's the Chancellor of the Board of Education, the New York State Board of Regents, rather. So Dr. Young talked a lot about culturally responsive, sustaining education, and had some really important, very specific things that he mentioned. And I want to just walk through really everything that I captured from our meeting last week. So when Dr. Young talks about culturally responsive, sustaining education, the focus that he puts on it has to do with it focuses first on good teaching. Again, relationships, connections, learning. Culturally responsive education in schools is nothing new. Is it something that we need to do a better job at? Absolutely. But really, what it comes down to is connections. Kids need to see themselves represented in the curriculum. They need to see, they need to have full access, regardless of regardless of the individual cultures that they come to school from. So, Dr. Young talked about the 30,000-foot overview goals of this process really have to do with meaningful, deeper learning. He talked about increasing professional capacity, which is something that we're really focusing on in the coming year here. He talked about applying what we already know to diverse situations. He talked about deliberately connecting with communities. He talked a lot about defining diversity. In our last meeting, we talked about diversity and how it's often only conflated with race. Diversity yes, it has to do with race, but also has to do with LGBTQ status, it has to do with economic status, disability status, gender, all of these different factors that our kids come to school with each and every day. And the point that I would like to say is that we're a public school, and regardless of your personal beliefs about a child's choices or a family's choices or their individual cultures, we are a public school. Every single one of those kids that walks through that door any single day is our kid, that's my kid, and we are going to bend over backwards to make sure that they get an equitable experience while they're staying at the schools. So he talked about not conflating all of this with just racialization of culturally responsive education. He talked about helping different types of learners have productive paths to knowledge. These are his words. He talked about learning to live constructively in a diverse society and learning to contribute to a greater community. He talked about equitable opportunities and access. Culturally responsive education is not new. Culturally responsive education is not a curriculum. For those who spoke last week about fears that this was some sort of state-mandated thing, it is not a curriculum. It is instructional practices that we know work, that we've been doing forever. He talked about the difference between teaching kids how to think versus teaching kids what to think. Dr. Young was very, very specific about how this is not a practice of indoctrination. Culturally responsive education is often conflated with critical race theory, and I won't get too much into critical race theory because that's a concept that we do not teach in schools. That's a concept that most people don't encounter until their postgraduate work. And really what that process, what that philosophy acknowledges is that race plays a role and is embedded and infused in all things, in all aspects of society. One of the best takeaways that I gleaned from Dr. Young is he talked about culturally responsive education being asset-based, not deficit-based. He's talking about the things that make individuals special and unique and how that's good for everybody. Preparing young people to live in a diverse world is good for everyone. Those are his words. So as far as culturally responsive education, hopefully these are the things that people hear and understand that this is not something to be feared, it's something to be embraced. And he was very deliberate and cautious in talking to us about doing it at our own pace for our community. Every community is different. Every community has a different makeup. Every community is different for different things at different times. And we need to do things at our own pace. If we do it too fast, or if we force it upon people, or if people don't really understand what it is that we are doing, it's doomed to fail. And he was very, very cautious about that. So when you talk about the overarching goals, there are four things. Welcoming and affirming environment, high expectations and rigorous instruction, inclusive curriculum and assessment, and ongoing professional learning. He said if you get to one of those things and do it well this year, that is a really good step. So for us, we know what our focus is for the year. First of all, I think we do welcoming and affirming pretty well. But if there are any kids that feel excluded from that, that is work that we have to do. High expectations, we are a community of high expectations. That's a fact. That's the secret sauce of this place. Ongoing professional learning, that's our focus for the year. And really, our next steps, and actually the morning of our community forum, the afternoon of our community forum before we meet with the group, we have culturally responsive diversity, equity, and inclusion expert from NYU that we're meeting with to get some advice about how to roll this out and involve the entire community in this process. Any questions about the culture of responsive, sustained education? Okay. Next couple things I'll fly through. Our community forum. We had community members reach out and ask for a community forum based on certain topics. And what we decided to do instead was offer it to a wider group. All of you received a note and a survey request from me via Parent Square this week. And really the only way to do this in a constructive way and make sure that we get to as many questions as possible and don't end up answering the same types of questions multiple times was to solicit feedback from the community. So if you have questions, please fill out that Google form between now and midnight on Friday. Our entire leadership team is getting together on Monday morning to pour through those questions so we can consolidate and make sure that we get to answer as many questions as possible. Those questions that are pertaining to mask wearing and things like that, potentially the following day, we may get answers given to us right by the state. So we will answer whatever we can. If we don't know the answer, we'll tell you, and we'll consolidate and make sure we do this as efficiently as possible and get to as many people as possible. So our community forum will be held at Waterman Elementary School on Tuesday, 8/24 at 6 o'clock p.m. from 7 until 7:30. And again, please fill out the survey, ask us any questions that you have. We'll work on answers and present that to the community when we see you next Tuesday. Any questions on the community forum? Okay, next, what I would like to do is, as far as academic goals and bringing the entire community together to really tease out what it is, what we value, and what our direction will be for the next 5 years, requires a whole community effort. And tonight, I invited Jessica Doctor, the Assistant Superintendent for Payuga Onondaga-Boces, to come and share a little bit about what that looks like as a district. The purpose of strategic planning is just that. When we hear people ask about committees, when we hear people ask about meetings, when we hear people ask about opportunities to have conversations that we don't necessarily do in a board meeting, this is the process. Anybody that wants to be included in this process will be included in this process. Right now, we're at the end of a 5-year period of our last strategic plan that actually ends and expires right now, so the timing is right. We would have started it last year had we had the ability to meet in person, and that's the reason that we did not, is this requires many nights and much community involvement and committees and meetings and task forces and all those things. And really it starts with taking a snapshot of the district, gathering people's thoughts, feelings, and opinions on a variety of tasks, and we take those and break them up and focus those into goals that we develop as one community and roll that out over the next school year. So with that, I'll introduce Jessica Doctor.
Thank you. I guess I'll come to the podium, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
You don't need your address.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Eric. Eric asked me to come and give you kind of like a macro view of what a strategic planning process could look like. As he mentioned, your existing strategic plan was by design a 5-year plan that is expiring, if you will, right now, so it's very timely and appropriate for you to start talking about this. So I'm going to spend minutes just to give you kind of like the broad 30,000-foot view of what a process could typically look like. But in general, the basic foundational premise of the strategic planning process is to design a blueprint for success that unites the community around common goals. So in embarking on a process, the goal would be at the end of that, everyone in the educational community knows what the district is about, knows what the district is working on, knows what their role is in helping the district meet those goals. That's sort of the general gist. Typically, effective strategic planning might involve like 3 particular phases. And the first phase is what I would generally consider like a communication phase. And that's what tonight is like barely scratching the surface of that phase, right? But in that communication phase, that's where, as a board, you might start talking about, hey, is this a process we want to embark on? And then start really messaging to the community that this is something we want to explore, that we want to get more input on.
So in that communication phase, that's where like constant communication with the community is important. In that phase is where you would solicit input from the community. So to Eric's point, one of the key components of an effective process would be total inclusivity. And by that I mean basically anybody that wants to be a part of the process can have a role in the process, and there are different places where people could have certain roles. Once you have sort of outlined the process to the board, so that might be the next step, right? Where the board would be presented with a framework of a timeline. Typically you're talking probably a 12 to 18 month timeline, although in some places if you're expedient, you might move a little quicker, or in other places it has taken longer. But once you have your timeline developed, you would get into phase 2, which is really the meat of the process, which is developing your plan. I would say that's a good 12 months of time, generally speaking. And Eric sort of hit some of the highlights of what that process would look like. But basically, in the development of the plan, there is a core team, and that's the group that is, maybe 15 to 20 people that represent all different community lenses, right? So you want to have representation from all sectors of the community and all stakeholder groups on your core team. The core team would examine the district mission and vision statements. They would look at district data. The role of the core team is to look at trends in that data to identify key priority areas, which right now, in your current plan, you have the 6 dimensions of wellness. That's an example of what some key priority areas could be, right? So you're looking for a finite number of priority areas that then that team would move on to the next phase, which is you would have task forces. And task forces are compiled of people with interest or expertise in those priority areas. And those are the folks that would really dig into specific data around that priority area, develop action steps, and would be responsible for developing the highly specific goals around those priority areas. There are also opportunity for anybody who wants to be involved to participate in focus groups. Focus groups, you would basically set up as many as you needed to have everyone feel included so that everyone's voice is heard. There would be interview process where more data is collected. And in that development phase is the long-term step, right? So that's several meetings and a lot of data review. But ultimately it culminates in the development of a plan that should be, in my humble opinion, succinct and most importantly useful, right? So to come up with a spiral-bound product that is too voluminous and not succinct is probably not a useful document, right? So you want to come up with some useful, succinct plan that would then get presented to the board by the core team. And then the third phase is work your plan, implement the plan, right? And in that stage, that's where that plan becomes the anchor by which all district decisions are made. So since everyone in the school community has a contribution into developing the goals in the plan, that's where the plan, you basically start implementing the plan, working on the goals. Critical piece of that part is just that continual review, right? Continually review those goals, make sure they're still relevant. Think about all of the things you've talked about tonight. The complexion of education today looks very different than if you had developed a plan 12 months ago, right? Your goals, your priorities might change. A couple just in closing, I think the 4 critical things, if I had to summarize what the 4 critical things are about any strategic planning process, would be communicate, 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 right? Communicate before, during, and after with great frequency. Be inclusive of anyone who wants to have a role in the process. There is a place for everyone to participate. Have a facilitator, ideally from outside of the district, simply because that allows everyone within the district to be an active participant in the process. And then the 4th thing I would say is just that have a framework that you're going to start with, right? So I think I started in that communication phase. There would be like a presentation to the board on a timeline. So have a framework, but also be flexible within there because things happen, meeting schedules change, priorities shift. So have a framework, but be flexible. So Eric said give you a 2 to 5 minute overview. That's what I hope that was.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Jessica?
So at what point do you start just putting that net out saying, hey, if you would like to get involved in this process, raise your hand so that people can kind of get that on their radar and also understand what time commitment is expected of them based on whatever role they choose to play in the process.
I think this is the first step in just alerting all of you and even the community that's here tonight what this even is. There's some work to do that with the greater community to explain what this is and what the ultimate goal is. But yeah, to marshal people through methodically through the process, as Jessica said, communicate early and often with each step. So my idea is to kick this off with the opening of school so that we can start messaging this and soliciting community interest. And then hopefully after that, there are things that, data capture things that we can do, like school climate surveys, so that we know even what data we're going to share with our groups. And then to really, I think there's some education that needs to be done too. Things like the collaborative learning cycle, where we sort of teach people how to look at data in a unbiased and thoughtful way. And then start going through all the information that we glean and figuring out as a community what it means and what we're going to prioritize together. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.
And with that, I have a couple of brief introductions, and I'll turn it over to very, very brief, because I know it's a long evening for everybody. Just quick updates from our administrators. Our newest administrator is hiding over there in the corner, right there. Heather, if you would please stand up. Heather's our new coordinator of instructional technology, and we are so thankful and grateful that she's here, and she's done a fantastic job already, and will continue to do so.
Good first 5 days.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And then after Heather, the next newest employee is Kristen Moses, who's our coordinator of student wellness, is coordinator of student engagement and services. So Kristen, tell them a little bit about your role and what it is that you do here.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Moses. I'm so excited to be here at St. Atlas. I am the, should I go to the podium? Sorry. I will go to the podium. I am the coordinator of student support services and family engagement. It is a new role, so it will be evolving as we find reasons and needs that can use my expertise. So what I've been working on the last 5 weeks since I've been here is really coordinating and building working relationships with agencies and school-based partnerships to get some student support, more student support in terms of mental health for our students, to create as many supports as possible to meet all the kids' social emotional needs and academic needs. I've also been looking at what we already have in place in terms of social emotional learning programs in the district, individual schools, and trying to pull it together to have a cohesive district-wide vision in that area. So it's not different in every school, and it speaks to the communication and consistency that you were asking about. Eric said to be brief, I have 2 minutes, so. I've also been getting to know my team, building relationships with my colleagues, getting to know the culture and the community, and finding out what people need, how I can best support the kids here, what do parents need, how can I engage families, how can I engage students, to really look at the whole student, because the mental health is a huge piece of, if you're not in the right headspace, you can't learn. So what can we do, especially after COVID and everything, to really support our students? So those are just what I've been starting to work on in the last 5 weeks, among other things, and I look forward to getting to know all of you. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Kristen, you're getting a question here.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Just a quick question, not to put you on the spot, but just what do you anticipate our biggest hurdles going to be, just specific to your role coming into the school year with all of these students? Have you been able to pick up enough tidbits I know it's only been 5 weeks, on what you anticipate some of our biggest challenges are going to be from a mental health standpoint for the students in this district?
Well, that's what I want to ask the students. So I got to ask that. We have to ask them to get that information and then go from there so we can plug the holes, and build up where they are. So, without having the kids to get feedback. And I'm getting a sense from parents and from family members of what that might be. And for my own children, I have 4. I know how hard it's been. So, I mean, I have a sense, but I really want to get a good sense of the kids that's getting at this. You know, what do they actually need? So, there'll be more information forthcoming in that area.
Thanks. I didn't mean to put you on.
No, that's okay.
One of the exciting things Kristen is working on bringing to the district is a universal screening tool to assess mental health challenges in our kids. We do a really nice job of assessing things like reading and math proficiency, but these critical things like mental health, as Kristen said, you cannot learn unless you're in the right headspace. We don't necessarily do a good job of screening everybody and seeing who we can catch and who needs what services, especially now after a year of isolation or just inconsistency and a lack of structure that a lot of our kids experience. This is more critical now than ever, so we're thrilled to have Kristen with us. Kristen also has a background in therapeutic crisis intervention and supports, and she's a 21-year battle-tested social worker from experience in urban environments, rural environments, suburban environments. So,
And a former school administrator at the building level too.
Yes. So thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Steve, want to do a quick sports update for us?
Sure. Okay. Hello, everyone. How are you? All right. So my hope, obviously, for all our extracurricular activities is that they will look more like normal this year than they did last year. We know how important extracurricular activities are for our students. So there's really no appetite for any cancellation. Like last year, if we have to deal with some restrictions or inconveniences, we will do that. But I hear the feedback I get, these kids just want to play. And that's what we're going to try to create the opportunity for them to play. Someone mentioned before where the guidance is coming from. Unfortunately, unlike last year, the NISPA has kind of punted this. They've told the state that local health guidance is what you should adhere to. Obviously, in Section 3, there's 11 counties. There's 11 different health departments. There's 105 schools. That means there's 105 different board meetings like this one going on throughout Section 3. There's 23,000 students. In our own league, we deal with 5 counties, 32 schools, and thousands of students there. The one common theme I've heard so far from medical experts is universal masking indoors. So that is more than likely how we're going to start off in our league. But there's more to come, I'm sure, as things change. I think Eric has already spoken about weight a week and things will be different. So we do start on Monday. We're excited for that in terms of athletics. For those of you might be listening in or here, JMLAB is open until tomorrow for JV and varsity, so make sure you go on there and register if your student wants to play a sport. For modified, JMLAB will close on August 25th. We'll have the new communication service known as Parent Square. This is going to be, I think, helpful for our coaches who now can have a much more easy way to communicate with students and parents together through text and email. So I hope that that'll be a better communication option for them and should replace whatever else different information streams that you're getting. We have plans to do a modified sport orientation for parents. We're looking to do that on September 1st. I think what happens is parents come from youth sports, they get into this thing called modified sports, which is sort of different. So I think it would be good just to kind of get a little orientation into the world that we're entering into for modified. Explain some of the rules and philosophies and things behind that program, which is a statewide program. For anyone who needs information on activities or athletics, you can refer to our handbook, which is on our athletic website. There's a quick link to it. It's pretty much got everything you need to know about our program in that handbook, so it's a helpful resource. And that is pretty much it. Any questions for me? Yes, Tom?
Just wondering, is there any guidance at this point on, not to look too far down the road, but sectional, regional, and state level competition for teams and individuals?
Yeah, so we are as normal. We are back to local, state competition. State championships are on, sectional championships are on, our league championships are on, so we are, it is back to a competitive environment.
Keep the fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Kudos on that modified orientation. I think that's a great idea.
Thanks.
When do modified sports, high school level starts Monday, when do modified starts?
Yes, modified starts the first day of school, except for modified football, they start a week earlier. So August 30th is the modified football start date, then every other modified sport will start on the first day of school.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
Great, thank you. Have a good night.
Excellent. At this point, I'll invite Jen Whipple, our Director of Learning, Special Education, to come up. Thank you, Jen.
Hi, I'll be short and brief. I thought I would go after the principals because I think they're going to talk a little bit about what's been happening in their buildings. One thing I always say in special education, our job is to make sure all students have access to general education. So all of our special education teachers, our related service providers are involved in the work that's happening in the buildings, curriculum related, professional development related, so they're all kind of part of that. A couple of highlights I think from this summer. We had some summer programs going on. We had special education teachers at the elementary level. We had related service providers at the elementary level providing some enhanced supports for students or teachers who maybe needed some consultation. So that was very helpful, I think, all the way around. We have all of our teachers at all levels really working together this summer to prioritize standards, prioritize curriculum, again, back to that theme of making sure all students have access to general education programs and services. Our co-teaching teams at State Street and Waterman have been working a lot together this summer, engaging in professional development, learning about co-teaching practices, improving what we're already doing, again, back to providing access to all students to the general education curriculum. I think that's about it for my updates and highlights. Any specific information anyone was looking for?
Two questions I have is, any like new registrants or entrants that are throwing your numbers off or?
Numbers right now are pretty stable. We're still in a pretty good place in terms of what state ed looks for. We're at about 8.6% classification rate. As of, I think yesterday when I looked, we had a few new students. They often come in, as you know, like the end of August. We have 3 new special education entries at Waterman, 2 currently at the middle school. But I expect that to increase as we get closer to the start of school.
The only other concern, comment, so with some of the remote and maybe some kids that are hybrid, some that just, obviously there was a gap for some kids. So how do you, I anticipate some people might see that as a learning disability a year or 2 down the road where it might just be a gap. So how do you necessarily educate, distinguish, that it might be just need more service? It's not necessarily a learning disability, but we need to bring up the...
Right. Well, we always look at response to intervention. We always look at what are the interventions being provided, where's the deficit, where's the gap, how do we intervene to close that gap. And then along with that would be all those evaluation pieces to take a look at the processing deficits, taking a look at really how the brain is processing that information to see if it seems to be a learning disability or if it's more related to that lack of appropriate instruction. And then if it's the latter, really looking at how do you intervene, how do you put services in place, what level, what rate, what frequency, what support, to make sure that those gaps are closed. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. Mr. Brown.
Good evening, Board of Education. It's nice to see everybody. Public, hello. Thank you, everyone. At Waterman, thanks to lots of hands, it all takes a village. We had some really good summer programs that kids will be able to engage in this summer. We had, the STEM, they love STEM. So we were able to do our STEM camps. We had a beautiful art camp at Waterman. Mrs. Berry had a lovely gallery walk that parents were invited to afterwards. It was a really nice event that she had. We also had some programs for summer learning in ELA and math for students in grade that were entering grades 1 and 2 that seemed to be successful this year. We always look at those programs though, and we have to reevaluate how they went. So they're just ending now, so we're in the process of doing that, seeing what reflective changes we might need to make for those programs over the summer as we offer those again. Many other camps we had, not all at Waterman, including world languages that went very well, so we're very proud of that. Mrs. Grinnell is our humanities coordinator. She continues to work with our staff on the very latest scientifically based research and learning to read, and that is something at Waterman that we take very seriously. Always have, and the board has always supported that, and I want to thank the board for supporting those types of things. Our teachers have attended several hours of professional development and programs and strategies that are promoting phonemic awareness and phoneme proficiency. Phoneme proficiency is something that's not new, but it's newer in the research, so that's new. Some of the strategies that we're learning are new with phoneme proficiency, and we're using a new program that's called Hegarty that we're all very excited about, and as Mrs. Whipple suggested, everyone gets trained in that, all of our teachers, special education teachers, regular ed teachers, academic intervention teachers, so that we're speaking that common language. We have some great new resources called Geodes, which help students to practice those skills that they're learning when they're reading directly after reading, so that they can learn those skills in text, which is really good. So a lot of that going on. We're also working on some strategies around writing. So we have a lot of things going on there, and we never stop learning at Waterman. Mr. Cohen is our STEM coordinator. He has also supported us this summer with really good strategies for understanding concepts around facts practice, which is something that sometimes we put on the back burner. He's also worked really closely with our RTI instructional support people, which is great because we do have to update our plans and strategies that we're using. So I'm really excited about doing that. Plus, we'll be at full implementation of the Smithsonian Science Program this upcoming school year. It's been kind of phased in, so we're excited about that. We've got a great, beautiful auditorium. Thank you for that at Waterman. And our main entrance is going to be stable. We're excited about that. So I really do want to thank the board always for supporting us. We feel very supported at Waterman. And I want to thank the teachers as well because they did one heck of a job. I want to thank the parents, but the one thing that I love is the kids. When they walk in that door, you kind of forget your troubles, so it's great. So thank you, and do you have any questions?
I have 3.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you guys the same 3 just so you know. Your support staff levels, like reading and math, so we're fully back. And I think you covered this last time, Eric, but I want to ask it again. So all of those support staff positions are fully back in place. We're ready for this school year, so our reading and our math specialists and everything are back.
I'm very excited about it.
And what do you think, as the principal and knowing kind of your student population, what are you more concerned about when you have kids back in September? Any academic setbacks that they might have had, or more of just a social, emotional well-being? What do you think is going to be a bigger concern?
Well, I think, I weigh them both equally. I think our kids did really well last year. We had them even our remote children. I mean, they did so well as far as certainly the academics. They really did well. So I'm always worried about social and emotional. I want them to be, happy in school, and I want them to be able to want to come to school and learn. So that's something that's always important to us. But I feel like we've got to kind of balance that out. I don't think one is more important than the other. Our kids did really well last year. They were very happy. And I feel like they did well academically based on some of the data that we have. It's collected because we continue to do our Ames Web and we continue to do our regular benchmark assessments in reading and math. So it's I'm always concerned about the big picture. So I'm going to be looking at both of those things regularly, daily. I know it doesn't give you one or the other, but it's
no, that's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to ask because
okay.
I think a lot of people have been, worried like, are the kids really far behind academically, or maybe they're okay here, but they have a bigger gap. So it's just a general question.
I think because we had them really for 5 days a week, that we were able to continue that instruction, and even the remote teachers were very consistent with the classroom teachers. and we had lots of live instruction for those kids who were remote. So we were able to keep them going, and the data looks relatively good from last year. So thank you. Other questions? Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Caraccio.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So as we wrap up the school year, one of the things that we needed to focus on was to your question, Danielle, with respect to academic support needs. So when we look at, we put together some opportunities for kids with respect to math, and we offered some opportunities in the area of world language. Those world language, we didn't necessarily have folks as interested in those opportunities, and when we structured next year, we're looking at how we can support kids with, whether it's, longer opportunity to kind of repeat a class perhaps, depending on the situation. And also in some areas, if they're moving on to the high school, we look at our 8th graders, some of the programs that we put in place with math in particular, we have a couple of sections that are able to kind of meet some of the needs of students who may have struggled at the end of last year. So at the end of the year, we were able to have, I think, we had sessions that ran for 4 weeks, 2 days a week, for mathematics in grades 6 and 7. And the idea there was to try to build a capacity for kids going into their next year of learning so that they're in a good position to do well in that next year. The feedback that we received from the teachers who offered it was very positive. But then at the same time, as we look at that, now we're looking at what needs do they still have? And are there needs in other areas with our other students, so that we're going into this year and we have activity period back, and teachers are available to provide support at the end of the school day. We'll have that back. We've added academic support, and so we have a person who's going to be available to meet specific needs for students throughout the school year, all year long. It's kind of a model similar to what you may be aware of at the high school at a learning center. So we'll call academic support, it's essentially a learning center at the middle school level. We also positioned one of our staff members to offer reading support. So we recognize that they're in that area where Francine Brunel, as Pat mentioned, has done a tremendous job in bringing us forward in our literacy action plan, that there are some gaps as a result of that happening now, and students have already gone through, that there's a need for reading support at the middle school level for some students who struggle with reading. So we have a reading support position as well going into next year. So these are pieces that we worked on with our staffing to provide additional supports for students next year. And we also had an opportunity to kind of take a breath at the end of the year and reflect on how well our families, our kids did. As Pat mentioned, we were in school for the most part 5 days a week with our 6th and 7th graders, and our 8th graders, they had the opportunity for the 2-day hybrid piece, but also that live stream, and our teachers did a tremendous job. So the pacing, I think we were able to keep good pace as far as academics go. Albeit in that environment, it's not your typical environment. So I think to what Kristen Moses mentioned earlier with respect to social emotional learning and having a mind that's focused in on school, when you are in kind of this pandemic situation, that there are challenges that come with that. So we definitely want to make sure that we're wrapping our kids in support as we go into this next school year. Very, very pleased with how our staff approached it, how our kids handled it. We had, I think, by all parts, a tremendous year under the conditions that we had to operate in. Because we were working together as an entire community, we were able to do a really great job. We have to continue to do that, and I'm looking forward to this school year to be able to have a more normal year in that regard. Practicing some of our protocols to maintain safety are very, very important to maintaining in-person learning. In some of the areas that we'll be looking at with social emotional, we had a lot of structure and very little social interaction as we went through the beginning of the year. There's a lot of structure in place to keep kids apart, right? To basically isolate each person individually. So this year, and actually toward the end of last year, it was as if we started the school year over. It was like a new year on April 5th. And so a lot of the pieces that we weren't able to work through slowly over the course of the year, where kids are just kind of figuring out the building and getting to know each other in pieces, that just all of a sudden was like, we ripped the Band-Aid off and that there were challenges that resulted as a result of that. And it was difficult for us. So we get to reflect on that over the summer, and we get to look at how we can approach some of those aspects as we go into this next school year. I'm excited for that because we've learned a ton. We did some great things. We struggled in some areas too. We learned from that, and we'll do better moving forward. It's just part of the continuous improvement cycle that we have. Brian Cohen has done tremendous work along with Francine. We have about 110 different teachers in over the summer doing curriculum work, some projects that are small, some are big. As we mentioned, the academic camps, we had a piece where we came together to talk about response to prevention. So our STAR assessments that families may be aware of that we use as a diagnostic tool, we've gone to Ames Web Plus, which we're really excited about. And that would be a K-8 program, so now we have consistency with respect to how we address and provide interventions for students who need those things. Our scheduling continues to go on as we work through what we might be seeing and how things are going to work and develop with the different guidance and whatnot that comes out. We're excited about working with Heather, their Chromebook distribution. There's lots of pieces that we're pulling together logistically to be ready for the school year. I definitely went over my 2 minutes. I appreciate it. I sometimes get going. Mr. Bell reminded me of that earlier. So thank you. But if any questions, be happy to answer.
I just want to say hallelujah for AP coming back. I think that offers so much more than academic. It's, I think it's a great time for kids to connect with teachers, with each other. And it was a huge hardship on working parents last year for kids to go home and then be back for sports at 4 o'clock. So preserve that as much as you can. Love AP.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And last but not least, Mr. Santoro, from our high school.
Good evening and good morning. So I just want to say, as a high school staff, we are just ecstatic and welcome all our kids back 5 days a week, full house. And last year we had our challenges, but we are so excited. And more than ever this year, relationships and connections. As a staff, we talked about we really have to de-norm our high school, reimagine our classrooms. Now that we had that time, the last few months from April on to summer to think about, our kids come back, when they come into school, they're coming back for the first time together for a full year. So we have to take a step back and realize as a staff that we're going to take our time, build those positive relationships, continue to make those connections so our learning can be the best that we can give to them. So we're definitely going to have those processing steps to kind of reimagine our classrooms. One of the things that we talked about this year moving forward for our schedule is really partner up math-specific courses with labs. So if I'm a geometry class and I need a lab, I'm now going to have a geometry teacher in that lab. So it's very specific to the need. So Mr. Cohen, Mr. Major, we got together, we figured this process out, how we best meet the needs of our students, especially these high-level courses. That there might be some of those learning gaps that we're really going to try to implement the best we can. Also with activity period. We are going to stress activity period. It's an opportunity Monday through Friday for all our students to take advantage and meet with their teachers, get caught up, understanding some gaps in material that they can have more than ever. It's ready, built in. It's a beautiful thing we have in the district. We're going to really emphasize that. We worked on this summer. We're going to implement 2 programs this year, academic recovery programs. One's going to be in February and one's going to be April break. What this is going to be a little bit different than our boot camp last year. We're going to be course specific. So if a student is struggling in English 12, geometry, perhaps even an elective that they need to make up work, pick up a test, we're going to have that opportunity for that student and that course specific during those 2 times throughout the year. They catch up, make up a test, and get graded accordingly on that subject. Again, another reason that we want to come together to kind of repurpose what we're doing, give our students the best opportunity possible, if there is that learning gap, or even to just enhance themselves as well. So we got that built in for this coming school year. But moreover, Skinny Hills High School, we're going to take this year as continuously the relationships, we're going to make those connections, we're going to reimagine what this school is about. The physical space, we're looking beautiful with the windows, we have more classroom space, it's going to be vibrant. Our commons area, we're going to reimagine that space. So we're really excited for the Laker Way when our students enter. It's going to be a place like none other, and they deserve that. And I appreciate everybody here because if it wasn't for you, the investment in that, we wouldn't have that. So I really appreciate it. And all our staff, thanks you too. So good morning, and we'll see you guys. No questions?
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Santoro?
No, but I love the windows. I love them.
You should see the auditorium.
Yeah.
once, again, I know we mentioned that last meeting. We are setting up tours. I think somebody reached out last week. If people want to see what's going on in the school, we'll throw a hard hat on and we'll take a walk. It's amazing, even from last week to this week, to see how far we've come. So please take us up on that offer. Call myself, call Connor Brown, we'll set it up.
Great.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry,
Appreciate it.
about tonight.
Second thing on the agenda we're at. I'll hand it over to Connor for the school business manager report.
Thank you, Michael. I'm trying to take 2 minutes as well. So the first thing is construction. We did have a reach out. So there's going to be a tour Friday at 2 if anybody wants to see. Walk around, as you said, throw a hard hat on and come see all the nice improvements. The windows, it's not the brown colored and discolored panels that you see, and I know they should protect from the snow coming in this year, so that'll be nice. We're just over 140 windows that have been installed. If you drive around, it's all exterior has been done. Mostly it's just because we're focusing on classrooms. What hasn't been done is the courtyards that are not instructional space, so we save those for last, but those should be done before the start of school. If you've been in the commons area, there's no more fishbowl, so we are taking that out, and we are incorporating a more interactive learning space where kids want to congregate. It's not a space where it's not utilized. So again, the tour will be at 2. Reach out to me. I'll be happy to take you around. Auditorium seats. The high school arrived today, so almost 700 seats arrived today. So drilling happened yesterday. Install will take about 7 days, so those should be in by the end of the next week. So moving along there. Those were the big things for construction. Any questions? So last meeting I mentioned the audit. I gave kudos to our staff. We still haven't received back our draft financials yet, so those should be coming probably at the end of this week. I sent an email out to ABF earlier today to congregate and go over that, deal with some things on how we're going to move forward financially, what decisions we want to make to better ourselves for the future, for the unknown that we battle every day. So that will come with a presentation to ABF. We'll have our auditor come in, and we'll have our auditor come here to give a presentation to the community and the board on findings, good, bad, other. So that's still ongoing. We'll provide an update as we go through that. Any questions on audit? And then last one I had was just the ARP funds. As I mentioned last time, the application just came out just in early August. It's due at the end of August, so August 31st. As you heard everybody speak today, every kid is different. Every kid has different needs. The application that we submit is not final. We will adjust. We will amend. Please reach out. We don't know what we don't know. So if there are needs that need to be met, we have the funds and can make things happen for all students. We have community forums and involvement, so we're taking those into consideration. We still, I still have emails trickling on other recommendations that we may have, so please keep them coming. We take everything into account. Still working with admins and staff, as Greg mentioned. We're using the breaks for recovery, intervention, tutoring, stuff like that. So we have continuous talks about that. We're just, basically the main focus is the social, emotional, mental health needs, the potential learning gaps, technology needs, EML students. We talked about the significant increase over the past year that we've had there. So meeting those needs, special education needs, all students. So that's our focus. We still don't know the impact on all those students. So again, these funds can be used for the next couple of years, and we will continue to adapt and amend those as we go along. So please continue to send your feedback. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Connor? Appreciate it. Okay, moving to new business. I'm going to group A, B, and C together. Be it resolved, motion to approve, be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby appoints Allison Lascala as a substitute teacher assistant, substitute teacher aide, and tutor. Volunteer coaches for the fall 2021 season. Temporary appointment of Tammy Wriggling, holds a permanent certificate in pre-kindergarten, kindergarten grades 1 through 6 to a teacher on special assignment position in the area of technology integration specialist, effective September 1st. And salary for Tammy Wriggling as well. On B, the probationary permanent appointments. Probationary appointment of Kara Strauds to a tenure area of teaching assistant, as well as a salary for Kara. The probationary appointment of Julie Piasek, I know I butchered that, I apologize. In tenure area of teaching assistant effective September 1st, as well as her salary. And probationary appointment of Joy Bingham, food service worker 1. And then C is the memorandum of understanding with Andrew Tidd, and that we approve that. So a motion for those approvals.
So moved.
Second. And moved and seconded. Any discussion on any of those 3 items?
Could you just talk a little bit more about the Andrew Tidd, but like, do we have to make up that 30% with another staff, or crunching his numbers all into the morning?
We were able to absorb that and schedule in a way that didn't exclude any kids from things that they needed and not incur the cost of an additional hire.
Now, my initial thought was he's getting 70% and he's teaching 4 classes, but then when I think about lunch planning period, that's what brings him to the 70%.
Correct. Any other discussion?
Can you expand on the technology integration specialist position?
So this was another, so basically this was Heather Buff's position that she vacated when she ascended to the coordinator position.
It's only appointed for 1 year, so do we anticipate
So
hiring after
these
that?
are annual appointments, and we anticipate doing these annually. Heather, if she's still here, how many years we've done this for you?
This was my 5th year.
Right. So these are all just 1-year appointments.
Thank you.
All TOSAs are 1-year appointments.
You want to tell us what a TOSA is?
Sorry, TOSA, horrible acronyms in education, a teacher on special assignment. Sorry.
I'm going to recuse myself.
So many acronyms.
Trying to get it.
Yeah, trying to get it out.
It's okay. I'm going to recuse myself from 6A because I serve as a volunteer with one of the individuals who's involved in that motion.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All pass. D on the Delaware County tax resolution, partial payments. Motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
First and second, thank you. Any discussion? Connor, you want to give a quick explanation on that?
Yeah, they were just pretty specific in prior years that you could only make 1/3 payments. It just gives more flexibility to taxpayers and go through hard times or stuff like that. So you can pay any amount at any time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any discussion on that? Questions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. It passes. E and F I'll group together. E is Ashley McGraw Architects Amendment number 18. Be resolved that the Board of Education approve the amendment to the professional services agreement for Ashley McGraw Architects for $16,700 for additional professional services related to Capital Project 2021. And then F is the extension of the first student contract that we've done for a number of years now for the 2021-2022 school year. So a motion for approval for those.
So moved.
Go ahead, first and second. Thank you. Any discussion?
Just a quick question for Connor or Eric. So I know there's a national school bus driver shortage. Are we hearing anything of that here locally, and is that going to impact back to school?
Not that we've been told of, there's definitely a shortage out there when people might have to go to quarantine or stuff like that, but for student and their agreements as they have to provide them. I know we've gotten additional drivers this summer, so we've been looking better than we have in the past.
Last year, Danielle, we actually were saved on 2 occasions with school closures, where a neighboring school district was shut down for quarantines, and it freed up drivers that we borrowed when we needed them, and then they did the same for us when we had shut down for short periods.
Erica, we had, I remember we had a discussion about a transportation survey and study. Where are we at with that?
We're in the second phase. They reached out just a couple days ago, last week, getting into the second phase of detailing more of what we want to put in the RFP for request for proposal. So we're in the second phase of that, and then once we tie that up, we'll go out and probably bring it to you guys first, and then say, is this what we want? And then we'll go out and bid. And there's 2 things that can happen. One, they can come in less, which would be nice, but there's also a chance they can come in higher. So that's kind of the risk we take. But we're in the second phase. We'll provide some more information as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes, thank you. G, Allen Hockey Scholarship Donation. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves a donation of $2,000 for hockey scholarships. Motion for that approval.
Second.
First and second, thank you. Any discussion? Thank you to the donation. We
I have a
absolutely
question. It says
appreciate
that
that.
there's, it's for one girl and one boy, but there's just a boy. Is there one for a girl too?
The female received her.
Okay.
That's what he said.
What's that?
What did he say?
I said the female participant received her that week.
I don't think they've decided the person yet. Just
Okay. But there will be a girl.
Yes.
We'll get
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Says thank you. H, I, and J, I'll put those together as well. H is approval of our wonderful school guards that roaming around here. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of Sienna Central School District, in recognition of the responsibility to provide a safe and secure learning environment for our students and staff, hereby authorizes the current school guards Eileen Sherman and James O'Brien for the 2021-2022 school year, and further pursuant to Section 26501A of the New York State Penal Law, authorizes both of those individuals to carry an appropriately licensed and issued weapon and pepper spray while acting in the capacity of school guards. With some additional information. Item I, appointment of data protection officer, appointing ultimately Greg Ramsey to be the data protection officer for the school district upon the retirement of Paul Blair on August 20th, 2021. And then J is the CSE, CPSE 504 reports, approving each of those. And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's passed, thank you. Moving on, closing items, A, process review, agenda planning for the September 7th meeting, take place on Tuesday, August 31st at 8 a.m. or 4 p.m.
September 1st, you said?
August 31st.
I can do 4.
Pulling mine up here.
Okay, I'll just say it. Okay, if nobody
I was
else can
gonna
do
say,
it,
I
just
can
let
do
me
it too,
know.
but I did the last one, so.
31st. I can do 8 a.m., but I cannot do 4 p.m. Any other takers at 8 a.m.?
I can do either. I can do either.
Yeah. So myself, Danielle, and Terry. Okay, 8 a.m., August 31st. Thank you. Moving to announcements. Upcoming meeting, September 7th, we just mentioned, as well as October 5th. Back to School Forum, Eric touched on earlier, which is next Tuesday, 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. Waterman Auditorium. Everyone should, through Parent Square, have received the invite ultimately with a link to submit questions beforehand, if you so choose. The other thing, obviously a board seat, Mr. Gers is no longer on the board, resigned. appreciate his service. We have the opportunity and obligation to fill that seat. We're going to take a similar process as we did with when we filled it with Mr. Evans initially, where we'll have an open interview process for anyone that has a desire to serve on this wonderful Board of Education. Information I expect will come out later this week on the process to submit ultimately your information and notice of candidacy. Then we'll go through an interview process and have an appointment thereafter. But again, I expect further information on that to come out later this week and going forward accordingly. Item C, second opportunity for public comment. I'm not going to read the long drawn-out explanation again. We had a very successful first round, so I appreciate that. I would ask for the same professionalism in the second round if anybody has any additional comments to make. So with that, I need to take it. Ma'am.
It takes me to get through like the first section of public comment to make sure I can get everything in for this opportunity. Joy Piccolo, I attend Woodmere Terrace in Skaneateles. I've got 2 children, sadly enough, that both graduated and are now in college. But again, to go back to the mask issue, I teach at Skaneateles Nursery School for the past 14 years. I consider myself so lucky to have that job. And this past year, we were wearing masks, ages 2 through 5, all day, every day. No one complained. Did the mask get wet? Yes. Were there snacks in the masks? Yes. It wasn't always pleasant, but we did it and it was okay. And we played together and it was okay. So that's one thing, but also not to say that the issue of individual rights is not lost on me. It's important, it's part of our history. We can't lose sight of that. But in this instance, I beg that we put that aside. I am immunocompromised as a teacher. Think about someone outside of yourself, outside of your child. What if I get sick? Also, I was sitting here thinking, how different is this than the peanut bat issue? You know, I mean, and I understand this is going to bring controversy also, but what if you could save one life just by not giving your kid a peanut butter sandwich? What if you could save one life by your kid wearing a mask in school? It's not going to harm them. They're going to be okay. They're resilient. Teach them to care about the world around them, not themselves. And that's really, I think, our common goal. And I guess my last point is, I'm a broken record when it comes to this point, but common ground, we can find it no matter what the issue is. We can always find common grounds and work together. We have the same goals.
Thank you.
Christy Krieger, Prentice Drive. Just a couple quick questions for the board. Is there a written policy that the Board of Ed has about helping students with gender transitioning? Does the school board support schools holding gender transition meetings without parental knowledge and consent? If that is such a policy and you all agree with that, can the school then provide the gender education materials and services and videos to the parents that were shown to children this past year? Does the school board support reassigning student names and genders without parental consent? As we're talking about CRS and all of those things, these will be some of the questions, and I can email them to you for the community forum. Has the school board investigated any of the complaints of parents who challenged the legality of such a policy of gender transitioning meetings and support services without parental knowledge and consent? Thank you.
Thank you. ma'am?
So maybe this is not how we usually do things, but we have these doctors here, and I would like to ask if they could explain to us the new COVID cases in Syracuse or in Onondaga County. County executive said that 40% of them were vaccinated people. So how would vaccinating more of us, prevent? I mean, I don't have a science background on that.
Yeah, but just a reminder, public comment, we appreciate you addressing us. It's not a forum to address each other.
I was just hoping they could explain to us.
It's just not in this forum. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
All
Phil.
right.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much for the public comments again. Move to D. I take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
First and second, any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?